for me.
Good for me too, Joel C. Cordes. Don't know if that got on the air or not either.
I knew you were hot micing it. I knew that was coming.
Well, I said, are you ready to go? And I started pressing record, and then you just kept talking. What do you want me to do about it? Arky here, Joel Cordes there. Joel, what's up, sir?
Hey, let's talk basketball. How about we do that?
Oh,
I'm really excited for that. We should do that today. That should be a thing that we do on this show.
It's too bad we're doing this on Wednesday because we normally number our episodes based on famous jerseys, and we actually have famous jersey news with LeBron James deciding to change his jersey. Not now. Just wait till Space Jam comes out, and then he can go back to being number 6 next year.
Yes, and just a quick little conspiracy theory on this. Not so much a conspiracy, I suppose, but I think there is symbolism in the jersey change. See, when LeBron has been the lead guy, whether it be in Cleveland or now LA, he has worn number 23. When he went to Miami, he changed jerseys because it was a new era for him in going to the Miami Heat. He took number 6, and there he had always said, through the 4 years that he was there, that it was Dwayne Wade's team and he was there as a supporting guy. I see the number change from 23 to 6 as an actually symbolic thing here on James's part. Maybe not so much for the rest of the team, maybe not for us, but maybe for his own mentality to say, this is Anthony Davis's team. I am number 6 again. I'm in a supporting role. It's this guy's franchise, and I'm going to do what I can to help out. Maybe that's out of necessity. We saw a little bit of a, LeBron in a more human state over this past year, a little more vulnerable and fallible. Or maybe it's just kind of where he's getting his head at. I could be completely wrong, but I'm reading some tea leaves there in the number change.
I was reading the article that was written by Sham Sharania for The Athletic about this, and it was like a paragraph and a half long. What else are you going to say, right? But at the bottom, it said, this is a developing story, more to come. And I felt like, is there more than is there going to be more to changing his number and offering to give 23 back to Anthony Davis?
Will we get a sit down with Bob Costas and a 3-hour, taking my talents to number 6 type of press release here?
This is the other decision I made.
Right. Well, what was really interesting to me is that he actually wanted to change numbers last year, supposedly, and Nike wouldn't let him. He wanted to let Anthony Davis take number 23 because that's what he had worn in New Orleans as well. And Nike did not want to make the switch because they had already, had plenty of LeBron 23 jerseys laying around for the Lakers, and it was not enough time. So this was brewing for a while, but supposedly Anthony Davis is going to stick with number 3 nonetheless. And I do think the number 6 change has that symbolism. If he was going to do it last year already as Anthony Davis arrives, that really only, to me, solidifies the theory I've got going here.
Okay. Joel's already firm in his own theory, and I kind of don't disagree. But it's almost perfectly LeBron. Like, it's so meta that, it's where people who like to hate on LeBron have something else to say, sort of like, what, you need this for motivation? Does it need this for symbolism? Like, why can't you just be a number and go play kind of thing?
Well, I think some of it goes back to Jordan changed numbers, briefly when he was coming back because it was supposed to be a new era. And then he decided to go back to 23. And Kobe changed from 8 to 24 after the rape allegations in Denver, and the trial was done. And he had some time out because of that. And he changed jersey numbers, and it was supposed to be kind of a new era for him too. So whether LeBron's taken a page from that playbook, just kind of that mental thing, or just the fun of it, I don't know. But I do see symbolism. I don't think these things happen by accident. There's usually some reasoning in the athlete's head for why they want to embrace this little, very minor change in the grand scheme of things.
Well, also, he wants to celebrate if the Toon Squad's able to win this summer. So, if they're able to hang on.
And Nike gets to celebrate now because they get to sell a whole different batch of jerseys, and people who already own a LeBron Lakers jersey at 23 are going to have to go out and buy the number 6, just like they did with the Kobe 8 and 24s. There's a lot of people who have both. So
I noticed there's no Toon Squad jersey on your back wall there. Are we going to invest in one of those?
I am not as big of a Space Jam fan as a 90s kid should be. I've seen it. My boys like it. And every time I watch it, I'm just waiting for Bill Murray to show up, and then I'm good. Then I'm done with the movie. I can take or leave the rest of it.
I flip flop on the new one previews that I keep seeing the trailers on whether or not I think this is going to be really stupid or really funny and interesting, like and fun. So we'll see when it comes out, because I will definitely go watch that thing. But,
if it has some moments, I'll be pleasantly surprised. I'll be good with that. It doesn't need to be a landmark movie, but I really do hope that somewhere in there they get a Bill Murray cameo, just for old time's sake, because he really does save kind of the third act, late second act of the original.
Well, someone has no more third act with the Indiana Pacers, as they have parted ways with their head coach, Nate Bjorkgren. He is gone from Indiana. Not a huge surprise here, Joel, that Indiana is going to make a change in the head coaching spot. I think their performances in the playoffs have been indicative of that. Also, the fact that the team hated him is probably pretty high on the list of reasons why you would get rid of him.
Not helpful, yeah.
Yeah, it kind of hurts your case if you want to become the head coach for next season. But just give me a minute or so on this before we go back to the playoffs. That we are now down a Nate Bjorkgren in the NBA.
It was going to be a surprise if they kept him, honestly. And winning one play-in game was not enough to save his job, though there was some speculation that at least cooled the tension a little bit. But yeah, no surprise there. It's reminiscent. There's a lot of teams. Phoenix tried this before Monty Williams arrived. I can't remember the guy's name. He was there for like one season and it just didn't work out. That's kind of, it's a really short leash for first-time head coaches. If you can't connect with your players, it doesn't matter what the X's and O's side of things are. And truth be told, some guys I think are just better equipped as assistant head coaches. And you don't necessarily find that out till you give it a shot. Watch for Terry Stott's name to come up, not only in Indiana, but in a lot of different places. If Mike Budenholzer gets fired in Milwaukee with them down 0-2 right now, obviously, and we'll talk about that. Terry Stott's name with the Blazers, I think there's not going to be much stink attached to Stotts' name because he got that team to the playoffs over and over and over again. There really just comes down to the fact he had been there 9 years and it's change of scenery, different voice type of thing. But he's got that pedigree that I think he'll be one of the biggest names out there, in addition to guys like Sam Cassell and Vanterpool from the Timberwolves / Blazers, who's going to get a lot of looks. There's going to be some of those names that have been floating around for a while, and rightly so. It's time one of those guys gets a look anyway.
Yeah, and listen, Terry Stotts, let's not be mean to Portland, but who's paying attention to Portland, right? Enough to where you've gotten a stink on somebody, despite the fact that Terry Stotts has been very successful in Portland and gotten him into the playoffs and won playoff series before. That seemed to have sort of run the course when you listen to the players afterwards, even a little bit of the management afterwards, that Terry Stotts probably needed to win a couple series to probably keep the job this year, and he didn't do it, so he's going to go for a change of scenery and he'll get another job. He's very, very talented as a coach. So I wanted to mention another story that is sort of more on the breaking-ish side as we're recording this, and that's the fact that DeAndre Hunter is going to be out for the Atlanta Hawks for the rest of the postseason. Has not played in Game 1 or Game 2 of this semifinals with Philadelphia. Torn meniscus. He's going to undergo surgery. He is done for the Hawks. The Hawks have split 1-1 with Philadelphia, but for Atlanta, who had looked like they were so fresh and young and deep and talented, how big of a blow is this to Atlanta for them to try to get over Philadelphia and into the Eastern Conference Finals?
It certainly doesn't help. Hunter was giving them about 12 minutes a game and is one of their most athletic wings that they have. But in a lot of ways, it doesn't hurt as much as you'd think, at least on paper, because he's been out of the lineup for so long and working his way back. It was about the halfway point of the season when Hunter went down and Cam Reddish, their other rookie, went down. Those guys are definitely the future at the wing position, along with Kevin Huerter. But with both of those guys out for so long, the Hawks have kind of already figured out what works for them. It's a lot of Bogdan Bogdanovic minutes in the starting lineup. He played 41 minutes in Game 2. Solomon Hill is just being a spot starter for them to begin the halves, and that's fine enough. He's been around the block as a veteran. Tony Snell would have played a lot more in Game 2, but he had to get stitches after an elbow to the mouth. I think Snell's going to be the guy that fills up a lot of maybe leftover minutes out of this equation, but there's not really many more to go around. Kevin Huerter's already playing 35 minutes a game off of the bench and has done a fine job with it. I mean, he's hot right now in the series and hitting a lot of shots. He's not a terrible defender. Herder's a lot bigger than people think. And the same thing, Snell and Solomon Hill are both big wings. So the thing that really stuck with me when they said that Hunter was going to be out is, man, they're down 2 really athletic, really lanky wings.
Yeah.
And yet, how many other bodies do they already have to fill those positions? At least 4 other guys that I've named, plus Gallinari is kind of a switchy forward, depending on the lineup. He can play the small or the power spot. And, Lou Williams can play 3-guard lineups with them, depending on how they go too. So Atlanta's biggest strength coming into this year, beyond the youth and athleticism, was just a really savvy amount of depth, especially at the wings. And it turned out that they've had to use a little more of it than they wanted. And they probably would rather have, not been down such talented guys coming into a series with Philly, but they at least have veteran guys who can fill those minutes and not make many mistakes.
Yeah, and it's not like they needed him to win game 1 against Philly and blow the doors off of them, or needed him to come back and give themselves a real shot in game 2 against Philly. And if it went for the all-star man named Shea Milton, who comes in and does everything that you expected. Or
by the way, tail of the tape, folks, go back and listen to our previous episode where I said, when looking at this series, and you can find this previous episode on YouTube by searching Basketball by Association or BbA, give us a like, a subscribe, a share, all that good stuff, or you can always find us wherever you get your podcasts. I said, coming into this series, Philadelphia, especially if Joel Embiid is not healthy, they need other ways to collapse the defense. And Shea Milton hadn't really been playing yet. He had been cold down the very tail end of the season, but he was a guy who makes the defense pay attention. Now, I was a little bit wrong in that Joel Embiid looked a lot better, a lot more spry in game 2, even though the stat line was almost identical to game 1. But if you watch the tape, Joel Embiid's movement in game 2, a lot more explosive, a lot less ginger. It was a lot more deliberate. Whereas in game 1, he seemed to be limping around a lot, like he couldn't get good torque off of that injured knee. So even with Embiid playing really well, the Sixers needed that shot in the arm in the second half after the Hawks made their big run. And Shea Milton is kind of one of those spark plug guys that you just put him in and, instant hot plate right there. He really gave them the lift they needed by doing exactly what I talked about. Collapse the defense, stretch the defense, just take a little heat off of everybody.
14 points in 14 minutes was in for a part to get that 23-6 run later in the third and the fourth quarter of that game. That he played 14 minutes and got 14 points. He had played 15 in the 3 games combined previously. So he came in and was that catalyst that sort of got Philly back over the hump, because Atlanta got down big, fought their way right back into it again. You thought, I don't know if I like Philadelphia being in the coasting role and watching another team come up and be sort of the underdog punching upwards, especially with the 1-0 lead. And it was thanks to Mr. Shimmy Shake.
And it wasn't just the points obviously were timely, but the way they came, they were so aggressive right off the bat. He gets in the game and immediately takes that contested 3, which on paper looks like a terrible shot, but because he makes it, and because he comes in, he just you saw the rest of the Sixers, whereas before they were like just tentative and kind of circling the wagons, like, oh man, we had the Hawks on the ropes, we were up by 15 or whatever, and they've come back, and the crowd, the commentators were talking about it too, how the crowd was just a little uneasy. All of a sudden, Shea comes into the game, and it just juices everybody up. Embiid gets fired up. They start playing better defense. The crowd gets behind them again. It was truly a turning point, in that series, or not in the series, in the game. And hopefully for the Sixers' sake, they continue to utilize him. Obviously, it's not a surprise card to play anymore, but I really do think he has a part to play beyond just one game and one appearance in this series. And that's not to take away that Tyrese Maxey has been very solid for them down the stretch and kind of won those minutes, but he wasn't having the same type of impact. And what a gift it is when you've got 2 different guys that you can rotate into really that same role. And it's one of the things we've said about the Sixers. Like, they really do have an answer for everything when they're healthy.
Yeah, and listen, it's the playoffs. Sometimes, like, you get that unexpected boost from somewhere sometimes. And Shake Milton, as you mentioned, had cooled off completely at the end of the season. Had cooled off in the playoffs so far. Was lost a bunch of playing time because of it, and lost time in the rotation. Comes in and was a spark when they needed it, and they got that crowd right back into it. Because that crowd at the end of game one, like when Philly was making their comeback, they were
That was fun.
They
was
were
fun.
they were. Speaking of yeah, let's just talk about that before we go back to what happened actually last night. The Suns and Denver matchup. Want to talk about a crowd that was loud and into it. Man, Phoenix knows what kind of team they got in front of them. Man, Phoenix gets a big win over Denver, 122-105. They lead the series 1-0. Game 2 is tonight. But just watching that crowd be into it from the opening tip, I missed it, man. I missed it. And that is a very decisively into it crowd. I'll just put it that way. That is a crowd that is all in for these Suns.
Yeah, and honestly, and maybe it's just faulty memory, I don't remember them being that boisterous even during like the Nash 7 seconds or less era. I don't remember it that way, but maybe I've forgotten it. One of the things that has stuck out to me, and I know you're going to get to this too, Utah's crowd was phenomenal last night and was a huge factor, I thought, in them pulling out the win, because when they went on the run, the crowd really got behind them. I think there's something to the fact that all of us coming out of the pandemic, especially as NBA fans or just sports fans in general, you realize what you've lost, that you had this whole year plus of not being able to go do this thing you love, and just the fact of being cooped up in general. And so I think there's like just a lot of pent up energy, not only like, hey, we got a good Suns team and we really want to support them and get behind them, but it just really feels good to get out and scream your lungs out again with a group of people. I think there's a lot to that. Like, it's just kind of this perfect microcosm of time of people taking advantage of that opportunity, and where home court advantage was not as big during the first round. In fact, the home team had a losing record. I think there was a lot of still getting used to that sort of thing, on both sides.
Mainly thanks to the Clippers and Mavs, anyway.
Right. Right. Yeah, they did not help the numbers there. But I think now the home teams are a little more used to it, and I think we're going to see home court mean a whole lot through the rest of the playoffs here.
I think so too, especially since some of these places are wide open now as far as fans. You started to see like LA get a few more fans in right at the very end. Like teams started to trickle that way. The Celtics started to trickle that way. But now you can tell it is a very different environment. That's why you got these home court advantages. Why you want them? Because when you got the people there.
Atlanta during the New York series, their home crowd was surprisingly phenomenal. Like, you kind of expect Philly will have a good home crowd, New York will have a good home crowd, Utah, Portland, OKC, they've got their reputations and whatnot, but other places are always kind of like a wild card. You don't know what's going to be there. And Atlanta showed out for their games too. It was the last time I remember that was during like the Highlight Factory era with Josh Smith and Joe Johnson and those guys. There was a couple years where they were in big series, and it was a really, really loud arena for a short period of time. And you just, you hope that's sustainable, because home court advantages are fun no matter who you root for, even if they're the enemy. Like, you want to go into that type of building and that type of atmosphere. It just makes the win that much better when you get it.
Yeah, our BbA bites in the middle of the week are noticeably shorter for a reason. We sort of just keep it as sort of a little bit of a snack for your hoops talk. And since we've last spoken, but since we've also last spoken, Chris Paul got into a big time with the points too, and was a huge reason why he just did everything in game one. If Denver wants to win game two, they've got to be able to limit that guy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And they've got to hope that Will Barton and PJ Dozier get back into the lineup. It was thought they might be in for game one, and they're not. I think because Phoenix is able to attack surgically from so many different angles and different guys, and that is very much the Chris Paul effect. Denver needs those reinforcements in its backcourt. It was a weak point for them against Portland. Jokic was that good. The difference is, Jokic and his front line are going up against a Phoenix front line that is just flat out better than what the Blazers had. So it's going to be tougher sledding in that regard. And I do think that the Nuggets need another body or two, and their guards need to play well because Paul and Booker are going to do their thing, and they'll get enough help elsewhere. This is going to be a tough matchup. I still think I like the Nuggets in 7, which is what I picked originally.
Mhm.
But I also said I don't like that pick. I'm not real confident with it. Phoenix is definitely good enough to win.
The Jazz briefly last night were able to beat the Clippers, and as what you mentioned was a very hostile environment for the Clippers. Also, the Clippers just played a 7-game series, and you could tell that they were a little gassed in that one. Weren't able to score. That fourth quarter was basically the chunk of the score, and it was happening in that game.
Yeah,
it looked like stretches that like it wasn't just good defense being played on both sides, but like there was some lagging behind as far as just the short travel and trying to get ready for the next opponent. You think you think that was the biggest reason why Utah was able to sort of square away game 1 and took advantage of that extra rest?
maybe. I think this is going to be another prize fight type of series. I'm looking at all of these series going, we have this chance to go 6-7 games in each one of these. That is, if the Bucks wake up against Brooklyn, we'll see. But both of these teams are really kind of like a mirror image of one another, even though they get to the same result in different ways. They're both elite defensive teams, and they both shoot the 3 at, I think it's top 3 for both of them as far as like efficiency. They're high volume 3-point shooters too. So they complement what the other one is trying to do in a lot of ways to make for a really good series. And you were right, in the first half, it was probably a mix of a little bit of rust for Utah. They were off a couple extra days. Whereas then the Clippers, like you said, coming off of this really, really tough 7-game series. But there was a lot of good defense played in that first half too. Like a lot of really good contesting of shots, making things difficult. People settled in, and it's really a sign of the modern NBA that you can look to a 112-109 score and go, yeah, that was a defensive battle. But it really was. Things did open up in the fourth quarter. A lot of that's courtesy of Donovan Mitchell. But I think this is going to be one of those series where every game is close. Every game comes down to the wire. Utah's flat out got a better home court crowd than the LA Clippers do. We'll see if they can, stand up and show out now that they're the only LA team playing in the tournament. But I picked the Clippers to be the Western Conference finalists. I still got to stick with them. But this is another one where the Jazz are more than capable of beating LA. Just remember, though, that even with the number 1 seed, Utah only won 5 more games than LA did in the regular season. So the difference between these two, whether on paper in the standings or talent-wise, it's pretty negligible.
Negligible is what Milwaukee put on the court in game 2.
Yes.
That is actually, no, it's not negligible. It's an abomination, actually, is what they put on the court. So in game 1, I can't even believe this is game 1. Milwaukee had 72 points in the paint, 72, and
I still don't think it was enough.
And they lost by 8. So they decided to go heavy on the 3, which they've been like a top 5 attempts in the league for 3. But when you are attacking and getting sort of a softer, not as big, strong inside presence like Brooklyn is, to such a degree, I would think that I would then in game 2 maybe try to go for that again. And that was not the case for the Milwaukee Bucks. And I think they were down 49 at one point in that game. Joel, what is up with the Bucks? You can't tell me the Heat was their postseason.
No. And this is not only on Mike Budenholzer, but this is absolutely on Giannis. Like, you're an MVP candidate, and the amount of
points,
the amount of standing around
of
bailout threes that he's taken after 3 dribbles and then just hoisting a half-hearted shot, the amount of times that he drives into a defense and kicks the ball away instead of imposing his will down there is really, really disheartening. Because you're right, the game plan worked in game 1 until they went away from it and they started to settle for those outside shots. And there is the little bit of the element that they just didn't shoot very well. But a lot of the shots that they missed were not great looks. They're not coming off the defense collapsing. They're coming off of lazily swinging the ball around the wing, then taking a couple dribbles, then deciding to take a three, or even worse, Giannis dribbling the ball up the court, waiting, and then taking the three, and the ball never left his hands, never came back to find him. There was no movement in the possession whatsoever, and that's what we saw even worse in game 2.
I can't believe that the Bucks played a modern NBA game with so little ball movement. Like it's not one of those like you teach it from the kid. Like they literally would just have one guy touch the ball more than one time down the court and shoot the shot. And it was like, hey, there's a reason you're down 36 right now.
And the really disgusting part of this is, like everyone's given the Nets credit defensively. The Nets get credit defensively only for showing up and generally standing in the right spot and being down in position. That's something. I'll give them that. But this is not a good defensive team. They have not done anything special or fancy that is stymieing Milwaukee. This is not like Miami or Philadelphia in past series where they built a wall and made Giannis drive into 3 players and it really screwed him up and Milwaukee didn't have the shooters to counter. They are literally not walling him off whatsoever. They are single covering an MVP candidate who is not putting his head down and getting to the basket. And you see the couple of times that he actually does it, he scores. So do it again and again and again until the defense starts to come and double you and wall you off. And then you kick out to those shooters who will be in rhythm and much more open. Like, this is what it's not complicated in this case. There's no special sauce or trickery that's going on here. He just has to take advantage and take initiative. And all he's got to do is look at what Joel Embiid has done on 1.5 legs, right? Embiid does fall in love with his own fall away jumper a little bit too much at times. But during the key moments, Embiid has been putting his head down, getting into the paint, and staying down there until he gets something, either a good pass out or more often than not, a basket, or at least a good look that collapsed the defense. Like, you're not going to make every shot, but you have to get good looks. And until Giannis starts playing like the leader of that team, the good looks aren't going to come.
This has not been a 2-good-game stretch for the 2-time MVP and Giannis Antetokounmpo and the entire team, sure. But, I mean, Giannis, brother, like this was supposed to be our 15-round heavyweight fight out of all this. Like this, right. Both teams were supposed to have the firepower and the strength and the star power to be able to carry a postseason, to carry a series, and it has been all Brooklyn, man.
Right, and Chris Middleton looks completely incapable of being a second wheel to pick up the slack. Drew Holiday, who normally is so solid, has been garbage offensively. Like, they are just so out of sync. It's really difficult to put your finger on it, but somebody's going to get fired, and we all know who it is if this doesn't get fixed real fast.
I was about to say, if that was the clinching game, what we saw on Monday night or Tuesday night, right? Yeah, Tuesday night. Monday night. Sorry. If that was the clinching game, Mike Budenholzer doesn't have a job right now. Right. So, because that was friggin' embarrassing. Like I never like turning NBA games off in the postseason. Even Memphis and San Antonio, I'll stick with it until like it's a blowout. But if it's a blowout in the first half, what do you want me to do?
I was over at a buddy's in my house. He's a huge Bucks fan. It's the first time we've gotten to sit down and watch basketball together in a long time because of the pandemic. I was over there, and that was the stinker that we got. And even he, as a diehard Bucks fan, we're like, yeah, what else do you want to watch?
I mean,
we did finish it. I will say we watched the whole thing, but it was very half-hearted.
Yeah, like it was the first half. I had a friend who texted me because on his mobile app in Tennessee, you can sort of bail out of a game, like try to cash out when it doesn't look like it's going your way. He's like, should I bail on the Bucks pick? And I was like, yeah, fast. All right, Joel, thank you so much for your time. We'll do this bad boy again on Sunday. We are on the old YouTube as well. Just find Basketball by Association. Until then, Joel, say goodbye to the good people.
Say goodbye, good people, and Mr. Arky Shea. We'll see you.
Goodbye.